Very well. This is our November meeting of the Facilities and Finance Committee. The first order of business is to make sure the meeting has been properly posted.
Yes, it has.
Okay. Second order of business is the opportunity for citizens to speak or any correspondence. I have no correspondence and I don't see any citizens here for speaking. So we'll move on to our action items. Approval of monthly vouchers. Anyone bringing any calls for monthly vouchers? Okay, do I have a motion to approve monthly vouchers?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Caffrey, second by Ms. Madden. All in favor? Do I have to do a roll call on this again? No. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Second action item is district line of credit. Mr. Clark, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, over the last few months, we had talked about establishing this line of credit. I originally thought we'd do it in July, but you needed to have an approved levy before you could go ahead and create the line of credit. So now that the budget has been, the budget and final tax levy have been approved, we can go ahead with the resolution authorizing a taxable revolving line of credit of $5 million with Waukesha State Bank. I included on the last page of the packet the actual cash flow statement. We don't project that we're going to need this line of credit. It's just a safety or insurance policy. If something were to happen that would alter our cash flow significantly, we'd be able to respond in a timely manner. The rest of it's all legalese. We worked with Quarles and Brady on developing the borrowing documents. So if there's any questions on that. We've done lines of credit in the past. If you remember, when our fund balance was significantly lower, we used to issue notes. You'd actually do a bid process for that. Then I think you used a line of credit. Back in the day, the line of credit was always kind of around. It went away at some point. So we're just reinstituting that, and again, just for an emergency.
Okay. Mr. Como.
Mr. Clark, it looks like there are no fees associated with this. Is that correct? Other than for our attorneys to prepare the documents appropriately?
Right.
And there's no prepayment penalty?
No, we can borrow one day and pay back the next.
Okay, just want to make sure. And I would assume that we don't obviously need to fill out the disbursement note unless there is actually one?
Correct.
And there are a few documents associated with this. Could you explain each of those documents and why we need those? I will
give it my best shot. The first one, the district's clerk's certificate, is just the kind of the outline of what's going on. And then some of this is kind of repetitive because the items like the master note is an exhibit to the earlier document, but then the actual master note is in, so there's two of them. That's why it's an attachment to the earlier document. On page 5, you have the compliance with the open meetings law. This is just us verifying that this meeting and the board's meeting was posted appropriately where it was posted, the process for doing that. The resolution itself is on page 8, or that's the exhibit on page 8, and that's just the legalese for the board to act on. The master note is the borrowing document, outlines the interest rate to be charged if we are to access the line of credit. The disbursement request, again, that's only necessary if we actually draw on the line of credit. Again, we're not foreseeing that. The treasurer's certificate is just the cash flow and revenues that are backing this borrow, if kind of the guarantee of the district's revenues being set aside to make sure we pay back any line of credit borrowing that we incur. The equalized value certificate, that Quarles and Brady's is, again, that's why that page is left empty. And then the last certificate of estimated receipts, again, that's our major areas of revenue that would be used to pay back any accessing of the line of credit. And then you go back, this is the master note. This is the actual master note, unlike the one we saw earlier, which was an exhibit. The same with the disbursement note. And then on page, or the last thing on here that's new, Waukesha State Bank, this is their commitment letter. Their version of what the board's being asked to approve. You'd think that you could just get away with just Waukesha State Bank's thing, but attorneys need to review these things as well, so that's why you get the other 12 pages or whatever it is.
On that particular document, obviously, I'm thinking if you were to turn on page, or to the second page there, just above the acceptance, or the expiration of commitment, those would be 2017, not 2016, I'm assuming?
Oh, yeah.
Just a little change. And then I did have one other question. If we were to go back to the district clerk's certificate, and you're to look at item 11, financial condition. I have a question on that. How does OPEB impact that, if at all?
I don't believe there's any impact at all. Want to make sure.
Moral obligations?
I don't believe there's any impact
Okay.
whatsoever.
Okay. Wanted to make sure on that.
No, it's a good question.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions? Caffrey?
We're gonna get this changed and not just like, because I've seen this type of wording before in an agreement that we did. So I kinda want that changed.
Yeah, I have a
Just 'cause
request
it's
into Mr. Lightfoot over at the bank to get a final version. He wanted to get me something to put in the packet. Again, we originally had them draft this when we thought we could approve it in July, but then when Quarles said we needed the final levy in place, you know, the document never got updated again, so we'll get that taken care of.
Makes me nervous when they're crossing out dates and writing them.
Anything else? Do I have a motion? Do we need a motion for approval of the levy, of the line of credit?
I move for approval of the line of credit as presented with changes that were requested.
Second.
Second by Ms. Reinacek. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Okay, school resource officer agreement. Mr. Clark.
We had talked about this agreement over the last couple months. Mr. Cook came 2 months ago to kind of outline the changes that we had recommended at that time for the SRR or police we call them SR, school resource officers, a different name here. So this is just the follow-up on those budget discussions. We are adding the 4th SRO to the middle school level. Your action tied to the final tax levy included funding that 4th officer through the Community Service Fund. So the financial impact is $150,000 in 16-17, and then $215,000 total expense in years 2 through 5. The district currently was paying $90,000 for the 3 officers, so there's a slight increase in those costs. But one thing that's different than what we've had before is we're actually setting up a defined framework where each elementary school will have a patrol officer. They're not in our buildings every day, but they'll have a direct contact with the same person at Waukesha Police Department to provide them, you know, in response to an emergency that may come up, or a situation, or community outreach, et cetera. So I gave you the red line copy of it. There really isn't much in here. There's some wordsmithing of the existing contract. The only thing that's been added is under Article 2, Sub B, the police department and school district shall cooperatively develop a schedule of community outreach events. So that's something we thought, with everything going on in our community with police and those issues, that outreach was very critical to adding this structure. Again, this is a 5-year agreement. The original SRO agreement with the police department, I think, goes back to 2001, 2002. So this is a service we've had in the district for an extended period of time. So if there's any questions on the financials or the agreement itself, I try to put a star next to all the changes in the contract. Again, most of them is just wordsmithing, not major shifts in language or scope.
Questions? Mr. Como?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you ever get a breakdown, Mr. Clark, on the 215,000, like how much it was going to cost per high school, what it was going to cost for the one SRO for middle school, and then the patrol officers for the elementary? We've
tied these costs to specific officers, but part of it, I think, goes beyond that, includes that elementary services that we're providing. But the way it breaks down now, the ones at the high school, we were paying $30,000 a year each for $90,000 total. Those get moved up to $38,333 each. And then the middle school SRO is $100,000, and that's the community service portion. Mr. Cook, his office did some research. In my experience, what we're paying for these officers is pretty good in comparison to other Waukesha County school districts. You know, everyone's scrambling to have costs moved to other entities. I think we're, in comparison to what other districts are paying, are doing a really good job.
Do you know if, you know, what that percentage is? Like, are we splitting half of the cost of, let's say, an officer at the high school level? Was there ever, you know, any of that discussed? Because I know when we first started this, everything was paid for by grant.
There was a COPS grant.
Yeah. Basically, the city, and we didn't have to contribute. That went away, and then we had a discussion with the city, and we were negotiating basically percentage back and forth is what it was, and then we wound up with a dollar amount. And I just didn't know if we had a sense of what percentage of the actual cost of an officer we were picking up, if it was 50-50 or.
We really didn't look at it that way, but I can tell you that the $100,000 that's coming out of community service was their estimate of what a new officer would cost them.
Okay.
So that gives you some idea that, you know, we're paying around $40,000 for the ones at the high school. Now, my guess is not all the police officers in our buildings are brand new right out of the gate, but so there is some proration. Our conversations really didn't take that form.
Sure.
But it gives you at least a framework of where we're at in terms of what the cost is.
Sure. And that 60-40, from a percentage perspective, I think is roughly where we were at 10 years ago, or when we were having that discussion. So it seems like, you know, although you didn't talk percentages, that it was kept pretty much the same. So yeah, so the increase from the 30,000 to the 338 or whatever, 333, I think is fair. And you know, I don't know how we truly compare to other districts, but to me, this seems like the dollar amounts are fair. I would add just a little bit of change to item 2A, small change, where it says an officer in the middle. It says an officer shall also be assigned to each elementary school. Why don't we be clear on that? A patrol officer. As opposed to SRO. I'm thinking SRO there. I'm going, oh, that's not the case. And I think it's going to be a really good benefit to our elementary schools to have that. So I think that's a huge plus. And can you also comment real quickly on, from a middle school perspective, whose idea was it to add that SRO to split? Was that our idea, or was it?
Ours shares with Butler, but we have had situations where you've needed them in both places, and then one has to go without. So having one that can concentrate simply on the middle schools also have some, provide some service to elementary schools.
Well, this is an important program. This is a very important partnership, and I really think that the new ideas that we've injected into this arrangement, I think, are very good.
My previous two districts, we paid the full freight, so full amount.
100%.
Pretty much, yeah. I
Wow.
mean, there was some discounts, but basically, I think the first one might have been 50%, and then as we added, then 75, then 100%. So.
Gotcha. So you think this is a really fair deal then? A good bargain?
I think it's as good as any that I've seen in my prior district, so.
Okay.
I mean, the best deal would be zero, but I don't think we're gonna get there, so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
No, I'd like to add that the reality is that the community as a whole benefits from the fact that we have these officers in our schools. I mean, they get a lot more information about the things that we're trying to deal with in the broader community by having them engaged in our schools the way we do. So it's kind of a win-win for both sides. I've never felt it was fair for us to pick up the full bill. I guess if other people are doing that, then so be it, because reality is part of policing the community.
Right.
It's part of their job.
Yeah.
But I also think that, when we're adding a fourth officer and going through a new contract, it's a good idea to look at the compensation rates and make an adjustment over time. But
And they still help out a lot of community events. You see them at a lot of the school community events that aren't strictly just school district, but where we're involved, they'll also be there as well, so.
And the other important thing I think in the agreement is, I was looking for it, and I guess it's at the very front, is the termination rights that both sides have with 60 days notice, which I think is very reasonable. And obviously, we're tying each other into some constraints, and if after a year, at any point in time, we decide that's unreasonable, I guess either side can terminate. So, Ms. Ronachek?
I was just curious if this ever includes bringing in one of the dogs.
Oh, yeah, they
those
do
schools
that. Sheriff's Department will do that. I mean, it's good practice for them, so they do it, but, yeah, we coordinate with both the Sheriff's Department and Waukesha Police Department on bringing the drug dogs in, so.
So the dog, can they substitute for the officer?
Well,
The dog is an officer.
The dog is an officer, right, Karen?
yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Karen?
One real quick. First of all, I think since we've had this program, these officers have done a fantastic job. They don't have an easy job. I think it's very difficult. And the thing that, to me, is most impressive about what they've done is establishing a relationship with the students. That, I think, is of the utmost importance, and I think that's what helps them to be effective. They're not just intruders into our schools, extra people being there. They assimilate into the culture, and they get to know the students, they get to know the administration and the teachers, and I think they've done a really, really good job. And there's been some pretty difficult scenarios that we've had to have them help us figure out, and in every one of those cases, I think they've done a really good job. So it's a big thank you to those individuals who are part of those schools. And with that said, I'd move to approve the contract as presented.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Como, second by Ms. Madden. Any further discussion? The only thing I'd like to add, Darren, is that I'd like to have us consult the police and department, the chief, and see if we can come up with some sort of community policing proposal and grant. I would think that would work well between the school district and the city, considering all the problems all these other communities have had. I think that's something that should be coming up soon from the federal level, and it should be some grant money associated with that. Given our demographics, low income, all that, we should be eligible for that.
Mm-hmm.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next item, information item, monthly budget report.
Okay, excuse me. We're pretty much on track with both revenues and expenses. Our revenues are right in there with last year's in that we are at 6.18% of our budget, and last year we were at 6.17%. So I think the only interesting thing about the revenue is that this year we had increased awareness of online registration, and our revenues are 33% higher via RevTrack, our credit card production. So it's taken a lot of extra handling of cash and entry of data from schools to the business office. So that's been a bonus this year on the revenue side. From expenditures, again, everything seems to be falling right in track with where we've been in years past. Salaries and benefits are right in there, similar percentages that we've paid out this year and compared to last year. Same thing with purchase services, everything is right in there. The one thing that's a little bit off is our first student bill came in a little bit later this year, so that's a big chunk that hasn't been paid this year compared to last year at this time, but it's in and we're paying it, so it'll show up next month. Non-capital payments, again, right in there, right on target. 81,000 of that is for the library, Common School Library Fund. Capital objects, some of the big capital objects expenditures included an upgrade to the wireless network for $166,000, $25,000, or excuse me, $27,000 for Coral risers, and then $25,000 for additional Chromebooks. We didn't have any debt retirement in October. Our insurance payments were $68,272 for our premiums. And basically, overall, like I said, we're right on target. Same thing with the special education fund. Nothing jumps out there. Any questions? Feels kind of brief, but pretty boring month, budget-wise.
Dronachek?
Thank you. I was just wondering how much, I don't know how it's coming in, but with the cards that we're using now, is that interest
P-cards?
back, or how does that work? Do we know, are we going to have a total of that maybe per month or at the end of the year of how much we've saved or gotten back? Where will that show up?
Absolutely, we can provide that when we start getting the rebates back. We had a little bit of a lull in the use of the P-card as we had some new staffing on board, but now we're fully ramped up again and utilizing it. We're starting to pay Airmark with it, which is a big chunk of money that we'll be putting on the P-cards every month, and it's been rolled out to the elementary schools. And actually, I'm sorry, all the schools have had their P-card training, and the principals have their card and using it. So we expect a huge jump in the use of the P-cards. We do have on the voucher report a section of how much we paid in the P-card that particular month, but we can certainly provide any information you'd like to see. If you'd like to see a month-by-month comparison or a year-to-date total, happy to provide that.
Yeah, we can put that on a future agenda just to provide you an update on our usage so far. I'll put that on my list.
Quick question on debt retirement. What's this short-term loans and paying agent fees of $10,000? It seemed like that was a budget adjustment, revised budget. Page 6. Surprising to see such a nice round number there.
What line are you looking at, Kurt?
The 600 category at page 6, debt retirement. You have interest for short-term loans, budget 10,000, and that's for 2016, 2017. And then in 2015, 2016, the revised budget showed 10,000 in short-term loans and 10,000 in agent fees. So what's our short-term loan interest?
Yep.
Why would we have agent fees last year? What would that amount to?
Yeah, we can bring back information. Really, I couldn't tell you off the top of my.
They were budgeted, but there were no actuals.
No activity. It's just.
It was just a budget.
I wonder if it wasn't a placeholder, and then we just never removed. We removed one, but not the other. Would be my guess. We shouldn't, as you know, we just talked about. We don't do cash flow borrow anymore, so.
We probably shouldn't be budgeting for interest in short-term loans then, right?
Right. Yeah. we'll take a look at that.
It's a nice place to have a movement of dollars, but if you're really not planning to spend it there, it's kind of not really kosher, so. Okay, any other questions? Okay, moving on. Budget review, 2016, 2017.
Yeah, I just wanted to go over a few topics. Unfortunately, the way the timing of the state's information that comes out in October doesn't fit well with our finance committee schedule and then the adoption of the final budget. So I just had 5 or 6 major funding issues or topics that I thought we should go back and spend 2 seconds on to kind of refresh, since we kind of, well, actually we skipped F&F at the final budget, went right to the board again because of the timing of the information. So I put on the cover of the executive summary, some bullet points. Third Friday enrollment continues to decline. If you look at page 2, the actual revenue limit calculation, which was really colorful. When I boxed the 3-year rolling average, and you can see that drop of students from 12,948 down to 12,831. That 12,831 is what our revenue is generated off of. But also, if you look to the left of there, the dots that I have in those little yellow boxes, 2013 will fall off of the 3-year rolling average next year. So even if our enrollment's flat, we're going to be looking at a decline in revenue limit authority more than likely next year as well. So I just wanted to highlight that resident enrollment, again, that's not the number of kids in our schools, but the number of kids who live in our district who may either attend our schools or open and roll out, or it is having an impact, and we'd like to see that number turn over at some point. Revenue limit authority, we've been working on this tax levy scenario sheet, and I'll walk you across from our preliminary budget, our early October estimate, and then the final budget. The district did lose $1.4 million in revenue limit authority. That's just revenue gone, and again, that's tied to that drop in resident enrollment. It helps get you to a good levy and tax rate story because you have less taxing authority, but in terms of revenues equal to expenditures over time, that becomes more and more difficult. The voucher program participation, again, that's the second year of that program, so it's hard to forecast that when you have such a small amount of historical data. We did go from 69 students participating to 109 students. The current cap on that is still 1% of our resident enrollment, shy of 130 kids. So we're well below that cap, but starting next year and every year thereafter, it'll grow by 1% until it gets to 10%, and then the caps completely come off. Based on current legislation, that can all change in a few months. So I can't tell you if that's a good number or a bad number. The unique thing about that program is we don't know who those kids are. We don't know where they're going. DPI just provides you with a number. So we'll look at that. I don't know if 2 years is a trend. Normally it takes 3 data points to develop a trend, but we'll have to keep an eye on that program and its impact on our financial situation. The property tax levy and rate, the levy went down 1.43% and the rate went down 4.69%. One thing I forgot to mention at the board meeting, the special board meeting when we adopted the final budget, we had talked about the Fund 10 levy or budget being in a deficit position, and I wanted to at the meeting, and I just forgot to speak to it, just tell you the pieces that make that situation. Site carryover, the district has used school carryover for 18 years or so. But that money that's set aside goes into fund balance, then we make the next year's budget, we spend that fund balance, so that's an automatic negative budget situation. That makes up $389,000 of the deficit for Fund 10. And then the other part of that was we had budgeted to make an extra principal and interest payment on our Fund 38 loan in the amount of $1,150,000. So those are the two pieces that lend to that. So it's not an accident or an oversight. It's just, it was a planned deficit position for the 16-17 school year. The last thing is the Fund 38 debt that we were just talking about with that extra principal and interest payment. As that issue becomes more clear over the next few months, we might talk about the timing of that payment, the size of that payment, the aid impact of all those things. But I wanted you to know it's on our radar to make that, to make the best decisions on all of that once we know a little more. So that's what I had. Those were the topics I just wanted to hit on quick, again, because of kind of the strange October meeting schedule we had. I thought we should review those.
So is there an aid impact to paying that off? Really?
I don't think there is. I in my head, and not to get too much into the aid formula because it's the hardest thing to talk about and keep people's interest, but you'll have a receipt come in that year, and you could have the expenditure come in that year, and they, for aid purposes, could cancel out. That's how I see it happening. We need to contact DPI and see how they're going to code it and see if that's true or not. But I think it's something that, in my mind, it probably behoove us. You have the interest savings on the loan, but if the aid impacts zero, why not go ahead and save those interest dollars? We're not making big interest on money sitting in our bank account right now, so
Yeah, so
neither is anyone else. So
probably something we should look into, and if it is an aid impact, then we should work with the DPI and our state legislator to get that dealt with, because there shouldn't be an aid impact for paying off debt.
no, but Fund 39's always been part of the aid formula, so I would agree that paying off debt's a good thing.
I mean, it wouldn't be hard to exempt that from the aid impact for paying off debt. I wouldn't think they just aren't used to
Whether they do it or not, I mean,
Yeah.
we'll have to look at the aid formula, but typically all expenditures have been included, and I don't know if they'll allow us to exempt that or not.
All you're
in this
doing is,
situation.
you're just shifting from one end of the balance sheet to the other. I mean, you
Right.
got cash over here, and you're taking it and offsetting the liability, so.
Yeah. The nice thing is with the projection models we use, we can play that out. We can run scenarios of paying half of it off, all of it off, staying with the same schedule, and figure out. Ultimately, the interest, you're either going to pay it off early and save interest, or you're not. But really, it's that aid tax levy impact that we need to spend a little time on.
I just think it's something that I think is worth dealing with the legislator over about, if you're paying off something early, why should you be taking a aid impact
Yeah.
hit? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. They want us to be sound financially, so. Okay, any other questions? Mr. Como?
Just a quick one. The voucher program statewide, how many students statewide are participating?
If you
109 from
include-
our
If you
district, but-
include Milwaukee too, I don't know, I think there's, I'd have to look, but I know it's, outside of Milwaukee, it's in excess of 2,000. Racine and Milwaukee are the big ones. I'd have to find out what the total those are. Now, those are funded under a different formula than the statewide vouchers are, so,
The Milwaukee ones are?
yeah.
I was just wondering how it was catching on or not, and kind of getting a sense of that. Is it extremely popular? Is it?
I haven't heard too much. I mean, in our district, we had 69 the prior year, 40 this year, so it's not, it could have been well over 300 here, given the caps they have on it. So again, I think if you're a district that offers a lot of opportunities for students, you'll be okay. But if you have some issues, or if you're not, or you're not able to offer some of the things that some of the private schools can offer, then you might.
Yeah.
There's a spreadsheet on DPI's website that lists every district and the number of kids participating. I'll try to remember to throw that in the Friday update
Okay,
with
yeah,
a little blurb,
appreciate
just
that.
showing you the numbers.
Appreciate that. Just trying to gauge it a little bit, so get a sense of it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to the budget development calendar.
Now that you've finalized the 16-17 budget, the work will begin actually tonight with the sharing of this calendar. This is the draft calendar for the development of the 17-18 budget process. Now, keep in mind that we'll be in the state biennial budget cycle. So these dates and topics and all these things can shift based on what we're hearing. More than likely, based on the last couple of budget cycles, we probably won't have anything until June, so we'll be playing off the best information available to us. A couple of things on September 13th I have in there, the tentative budget hearing date, but ultimately the board needs to choose that date. This is roughly where it was this year, so that's why I put it in there. And then October 9th through 11th, again, we have that cycle of information in October and so I don't know if we were comfortable with how we did it. I didn't like how we did it 2 Octobers ago, where that rate was kind of bouncing all over the place over a couple weeks. This year, what I didn't like is the budget and tax levy went right to the board, even though we had reviewed it. That wasn't perfect. I don't know if it's bad. So I have in there, F&F may want to schedule a meeting after October 15th certifications. That way we could review final numbers. So again, we don't have to make that decision now. I just wanted to have us thinking about it. I don't know if there is a perfect process in October or not, but at that point, everything's kind of in place except for a couple of line items in the budget. So something to think about. Otherwise, it's pretty similar to how it flows year to year.
Quick question. I mean, one of the big parts of our budget is the employee compensation plan. And we talk about review of that, but there probably should be a formal approval every year of the plan. I guess that happens when we negotiate our settlement,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Yeah.
And the handbook too. I mean, those are the two components.
But they're supposed to be independent of each other too, though. We gotta have it in,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can't be doing one in conjunction
Right.
with the other in reality.
Right.
Yeah, I have it in here as the month of May. It's nice for us, and I think it's nice for staff. This year, we accomplished having it all in place. We didn't get into back pay and all those other, it was all done on the early part of summer side of it. So that's why I put it in that rough area of time is, if we can accomplish that, I think it's more the better for everybody. Everyone knows where they're at. My staff's not doing back pay. So it's just a rough target.
I just think if we had a regular schedule where we said, last time it was like, oh, well, we're not settling. Well, there's implications of not settling. So rather than having a gray area about what our schedule is, maybe we should have a more firm schedule saying that, we need to approve our employee compensation plan by such and such a date. And expecting to have an agreement with the bargaining unit at this date, and then later on we have this other portion we have to handle. Some sort of schedule put together that's worked out between you and the HR department, so that the other interested parties, stakeholders know about it, and then there's no surprises. And we can say strictly, hey, here's the schedule. You were unable to meet we collectively were unable to meet the schedule, and that's why we have these extensions and sudden surprises that bothered some people last year. Mr. Como.
I think this is our first year ever, I think since I've been on the board, that we haven't had to deal with back pay. So, I think that's a good thing, and I think your suggestion, Mr. O'Brien, is a good one. If we can identify specifically, at least maybe we even want to say we want to begin bargaining at this time too. So not only target dates, but we might even want to, target end dates, but maybe we want to have target start dates just like we do for other tasks that we do. We're beginning this process at this time.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to overburden the calendar, but I do want to say we should have maybe 3 dates in there related to actual that employee compensation portion. You know, backdating it from when the last date you would be comfortable with, and then working back to those dates, working with HR as to where those other dates would be and what
Yeah, I
they
mean,
encompass.
the compensation committee could have the exact same form. I mean, just obviously customize it to their timeline, but each committee could have something like this.
Mr. Como?
Well, to me, there's really three components to compensation. Well, there's lots more, but we have the base negotiations with the EAW. We have supplemental pay, and then we have the handbook. And the handbook covers all sorts of things. So those are kind of the three big areas, and obviously benefits are part of compensation, so on and so forth. So, I mean, we could take this to the nth degree, but I'm thinking the three big things are the base compensation, supplemental compensation, and handbook kind of covers everything.
And we should put a date in for the other compensation, which would include administrative, custodial, and all that, because there's no union bargaining there. It's just a date when we would say, here's what we're going to do, so we can roll that into our budget. So you have your cutoff date, that is the final date, and then you can backdate those other items from there, maybe. If Chris agrees to that, I mean,
Yeah, I'll talk with Chris tomorrow.
Talk to Chris about it.
Yeah, so what I'd like about that is we are encouraging everyone to work together to have agreements and everything in place so that we don't have to do back pay ever again. I kind of like that as a goal, to be done.
I know
and
3
have
people
things in
that would really
place.
like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're in a position to do that, and we haven't always been in a position to do that. So I think this is an excellent suggestion, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments on the budget development calendar? I think every board member should make sure they understand that we have a calendar. So if they have any questions about what's going on, there's a schedule. Okay, thank you very much. Next discussion item is the planetarium equipment request.
Yeah, Dave DeReamer, who's been the director of planetarium for years and years and years, has had conversations with Dr. Gray and myself about the need, and maybe, I don't know if he's reached out to any of the board members or not, but the need to replace the equipment at the planetarium. And he'd like to start seeking out some fundraising and all that. And I said, well, let's not do anything until the F&F committee knows that this is out there as a topic. I didn't want you hearing about a fundraiser for the planetarium equipment from wherever you go these days to find out things. The estimated budget, I mean, it's not cheap equipment, it probably isn't a surprise to you. He's contacted, I'm going to say there was like 4 or 5 firms who are really kind of the drivers in this, a pretty specialized area. To get some, rough budget numbers, he's looking at $300,000 to $400,000. So I don't have a financing plan. I kind of wanted to throw out there to see what your thoughts were on it. If we want him to pursue fundraising, are we? I mean, I don't think we need to have firm answers tonight, but are we going to match? Does he have to fundraise all of it? What kind of guidance could we give him? Is this a priority for the board or not? So I just wanted to kind of throw out the topic to get your thoughts on. I mean, I think the planetarium's a very popular program, but I'm not really sure where this committee lies, or if you'd want me to come back with a financing plan, or after hearing the input tonight, or what. So I'm just throwing it out there for discussion.
Well, from my perspective, I think there's something that we should be working with our community with. It's our school community, which is our PTOs. And I think Mr. DeReamer has to come through with what his expectations are relative to an upgrade. Why is it needed? Is there other ways of doing it at a lower cost? What is the reason for that scope? Is there such a thing as refurbishment versus replacement? Those types of things. I mean, basically you're talking about a light system to a certain extent, right? Mr. Como?
Yeah, I think was it 12 years ago when we replaced this equipment? Was it that long ago?
At least.
Yeah, 12, 13 years
Yeah.
ago. And at that time, we actually, to save costs, we bought used equipment. So I think that it's just at the end of life. And I do believe that the technologies have changed quite a bit in terms of how to display constellations and so on and so forth. So I think the technology has really changed quite a bit. So I don't know if refurbishment is actually, and it might be, maybe it's an option, but I'm not sure if it really is. I do think that Mr. DeReamer has done a really good job over the years building up the program and the awareness and reaching out to other districts and having students come in. That was a challenge for him a dozen years or so ago because we didn't have as much volume coming into our district and not getting it used. We wanted to generate some revenues through that process. So it would be nice to kind of know, some of the breakdown of the revenue generations from other districts. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see a breakout of the various programs, how many students. I think roughly half the students come from the district and half are outside of the district. And, what organizations are we working with besides schools? The Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, that kind of thing. So a better understanding of the program so that we can start to really see how this fits into and how it's grown over the last dozen years, how it fits into our culture and our programs here. So understanding where we've been. And then are there future goals? Are there any future goals that he has that may be different from where he's been with the program in the past? This cost is substantially more than what we paid back then. I think it was $150,000, $175,000, again, for refurbished equipment. But again, I think the equipment's really different. I don't think the technology is the same anymore, so.
I asked Dave to look at a number of different options, and I'm assuming that was one of the options, but I don't know that. But he came up with a approximate range of costs, and there's fundraising opportunity, there's grants available. This is also in conjunction with the county, who may have some resources, but I think what we're looking for now is just allowing Dave to go out and kind of research, potential fundraising, research potential grants and so on. I don't think there's any intention here to say, okay, you're approved to go and get these things because we're going to cover the difference. I don't think we've said that, but even if there is some district contributions, again, that can be done over say 2 fiscal years to also minimize any net proceeds that are needed. But I think in this case, we can provide the information on current revenue, number of students, both in the district and outside the district. But I think we're looking for now is just can Dave go and start pursuing possible funds to replace some of the equipment here. And whether all the equipment needed to be replaced or not is another issue. Now, again, I'm not a great technology wizard, so I don't know if old equipment can work with the new equipment, but there may be some things that could be phased in over time as well.
Ms. Ronchuk?
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to Darren, because we were surprised once by a gymnasium full of parents that were upset about a financial issue that was going to come, and we heard it from them first instead with the cell tower. So when people are trying to do things, thank you for letting us know first. I personally would like to know if there are used materials, equipment out there from, let's say, a museum, another observatory, because technology is updating so often. Maybe some of these large entities are going to be turning over some of their equipment. I know at our home we don't buy new clothes, shoes, furniture, cars. We go secondhand because we're on a budget, and that's what we have here, a budget. So I just want to know that there isn't someone out there that has this equipment, and by putting this out there, by him going and doing the research, our community members would know, our parents, local businesses, because we do have a lot of connections nowadays with all of our schools. So our community partners, I'm sure I know this equipment isn't like, you'd buy anywhere, but the more people know, the more people can say, hey, we can help out. So thank you for bringing this to us. And I have another question. Who did, Mrs. Stack, what is your first name again? Sherry. Who did your nameplate? Did you guys see that?
It's just,
I know,
it's
but
temporary.
they used Photoshop or whatever font to make it look like it was exactly carved like ours. Did you guys see that?
You can, it's just basic, there's Arial type in, we have color printers, and so.
Yeah.
Todd
Probably
did it.
took all of about 8 seconds.
What you did today,
You
Todd.
do that.
So creative. Anyway, didn't mean to get off topic, but I just
So,
wanted to say that.
all Dave's looking for is an okay to,
Start pursuing, and what he was looking for is he didn't want to go out and, talk to the county, talk to other organizations, and then you see some county people at another meeting and saying, oh, by the way,
Yeah, hey.
we're looking for money for, I think it was more of a heads up. I think, he's headed in the right direction on this, but just wanted to get an idea if it's okay to start pursuing outside funding for
Right.
this.
I remember once we had a F&F committee meeting at the planetarium. Do you remember that?
It was about 6 years ago.
Yeah, it was a little while
Yeah.
ago. I mean, I think the planetarium is fantastic, but I guess the concern that I would have is just on the planetarium itself is how much time is left on the equipment. We had a fundraising for some things a while back that never materialized, and we had a lot of years into that fundraising, and I wonder if the equipment here has got that same longevity left. I'm talking about the football fields, which we fundraised for a long time.
Yeah.
Didn't get anywhere with it. Because he states in here he'd like to start in 17 or 18. Is there?
Oh,
only-
I see what you mean.
Is there only 2
the-
years left? I mean, 300 to 400.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think we'd have to get that information
Yeah,
from him.
okay.
Um,
Because if you can't
and-
get a
and again,
football field in that amount of time in 3 or
Right,
4 years,
right.
you're definitely not going to get a planetarium.
I think what though he's looking, in this particular case, there are some grants out there, and there's some other organizations who might, contribute, well before the 2-year period. So, no, I understand that situation.
Another thing I would love to know is if you could do other things with the planetarium, such as show movies on the dome. That would have a lot of, I think it would have better marketability if you could do other things than show the stars.
Put an IMAX theater in?
IMAX?
That'd be great.
Well,
No, yeah,
Charge the
absolutely.
public.
something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
asked him that, and
yeah.
he said that is definitely possible, but not with the current equipment. But, I mean, you could do different field trips
Yeah.
besides just.
Right,
Especially at the Retzer.
yeah.
You could do
yeah.
a lot of different field trips besides just stars.
Well, I think that's the benefit of having him think this stuff through and giving a presentation to the committee.
Right.
I just think when you say $300,000-$400,000 for what? I'm not saying I don't want to do it, but there's no scope here. And seems like every time we get into this, it's money out of the district pocket. There's really not that much raised. And you talk about ROI. There is no ROI in this. This is just an educational expense. So
That's why I like
It's-
multiple things that
yeah.
you could do with it so you could increase your ROI.
Well, let's get the numbers, and if we need, we could potentially have another F&F meeting out there, and he can actually go through
Great.
what the needs are.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting program.
Well, I think it's part of the, when you talk about that planetarium
Yeah.
scope nowadays, because of the political implications of our environment, whether you believe in it or not, your grant capability from private donors to demonstrate to children the effects around the world of climate change. If that's something that can be done through the planetarium, I think that there's some grants that can be done for that. Because, different parts of the world get affected differently. And you can't illustrate that sitting in Waukesha or sitting in wherever. And so maybe there's something we can get more out of the planetarium
Right.
than just past use. But, Mr. Como?
Yeah, I was just going to play off of what you're saying here, Kurt, in terms of I don't think you can just go out and fundraise without telling people exactly what that's going to be. You just can't start that process. People want to have details, so it's not only the F&F committee that needs the details. I think in order to properly fundraise, you have to have those details to present to the community. And that's true also for grant writing. You need to be very specific in the grant writing. So, yeah, I think, you know, it's a little too, we can't just say start fundraising. We need the details definitely first.
I guess what I'm taking from this meeting is, I think our next step maybe is bringing Dave in here
December.
to walk you through.
Yeah. December, the sooner the better.
I can't do
Yeah.
justice to the, I mean, that's not my area.
And I'll try to get out there and look at it and have a one-on-one with him as well. Any other questions on the planetarium? Been a great meeting tonight. If no other business involved, I'm ready for adjournment. How about you guys?
Yes.
Okay, meeting's adjourned.